All right, are we good to go live? Excellent. Welcome to K-12 Education Budget. We have a full agenda for today and tomorrow and Thursday. So I do want to do go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. And they start here. There's an echo. Somebody needs to turn theirs on to mute. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, first announcement. The agenda originally said that we would be having a hearing on House Bill 2019 on Thursday. I'm not sure if it's updated yet. If it is not, please note it is Monday, February 8th. That means that we would like you to contact Roger, my assistant, by Thursday at 3:30 if you would like to provide testimony. Now, I will tell you on this bill, last bill we had was rather lengthy, and that is totally fine, but we're going to make it shorter for both proponents and opponents. So it's going to be 7 proponent, 7 opponent for 2019. So if you want to coordinate as a group on who you would like to speak, you can do so, or it's first come, first serve. I would recommend 2119. I would like an alternate as well. So if there's an 8th that wants to offer their testimony, that would be an alternate testimony if someone wasn't able to attend or get on remotely. Written testimony, of course, is not limited. It's only limited by our ability to handle it. So keep that in mind. Also, when you're writing testimony, when it is a bill, please, at the top, I would like you to not only write what bill it is, and not just the number, but the description, but I would also like you to write what kind of testimony you are providing. It's very important. Is it written only? Is it oral? Is it opponent, proponent, that kind of thing? So be specific. We also want your name at the top, not just at the signature line. Your name, your title, where you're from, who you're affiliated with, and your email. So please do that. If you're wondering if this is found anywhere, I do believe it's on the conferee rules that are attached with the committee rules that can be found on our K-12 committee website. And you can just go and click and locate that. Representative Wynn asked me to make sure all of our new members understand the amendment process, and I think that's a really valid request. And let me talk about that for a minute. When you bring your amendments, it is best that you go to a revisor and have it drawn up. If you have not been able to draw that up, but you have a conceptual, we can try to work with you on it. If it gets too complicated, we might just let there be a vote and then it may die. Or we might say, why don't you take that back to the revisor and work offline and prepare it for a floor amendment, something like that. The other request I would make is last year, if whoever was part of this committee may recall, at one time we had one individual that had maybe 15 amendments and they printed them all out. So what I would recommend is I do not want to entertain 15 different amendments. That will keep us here until midnight. What you need to do is combine your amendments. That doesn't mean just one into one giant amendment, but it means, be reasonable. If you have 10 different things you want to change, maybe you put some of them in one amendment and some of them in another amendment. Just kind of consider your committee and what you might be able to accomplish and what you might not be able to accomplish. So just kind of keep all of those things in mind. Again, be sure your testimony for Monday is you are contacting Roger by 3:30. If you don't, then you may not be able to provide anything other than written. But just be in communication with him. Committee, do you have any questions about that and the process? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I missed what you were saying. There's going to be limited number of spokespersons per opponents.
Yes. Yes, on Monday. What happens generally is that it is up to the purview of the chair to decide how and how long, whether it's 5 minutes, or I could say unlimited testimony, but I'm only giving you 2 minutes. Well, that was really hard last time when I only gave 3 minutes. 3 minutes to our conferees. So I would prefer to have fewer conferees. Generally, they have the same arguments, proponents and opponents. So there's only so many times if you oppose a certain philosophy that you want to hear a certain type of testimony and vice versa, because it's generally very similar. So that's why if I limit it, then I can give everyone 5 minutes. And that just seems like, yes, and written. Written is unlimited. That's right. And as I mentioned, the only thing that limits that is our capability. So if we got 200 written, Roger might not be able to process that. He may not be able to give that to you. He's certainly not going to print that. So that's the limitation. Okay, now if we don't get it right, no worries, because we're just kind of working through this. We're all new at some point, and so we're happy to kind of backtrack if we need to. We will be working a bill likely today, and we will, and you do have to be in the Capitol. We have some members that are in their offices, but they would have to show their backgrounds when they vote. And we do have to have quorum in order to vote. We will, if we weren't able to work something today, we would work it tomorrow. If we aren't able to do that, we will work it Thursday. We will pass out or do final action on bills this week. Tomorrow is the remote learning hearing, and I would just let you know that we have probably about 15 oral testimony on the topic of remote learning. And you will have that probably in the morning, because it's been taking a lot to gather all of it. Since it's an informational hearing, not every conferee will necessarily have a formal written testimony, and some may not. We have some kids, and so theirs may not be that, and that's fine, because it's not a bill. And in addition to that, you are going to have a ton of written testimony, some that are positive, some that are negative. It's all over the board, and they will not be separated. So, because this is not a proponent-opponent, this is a discussion on remote learning. And 67, 63, somewhere in there? 80? Oh, goodness, it's over. Anything that comes to us now is dead, because it's not 24 hours, so we will not be forwarding it. So if anyone sends you an email, it will not be included. They'll need to send them directly to you all. Okay, I think, is there anything that I'm forgetting? Also, today we're going to go over these two budgets. We will work those on Thursday. That is because on Monday I have to report it out to appropriations. Appropriations is, so we are going to approve a budget, but it's going to be a recommendation. The Appropriations Committee is the one that actually chooses whether or not to fund or not fund. All right, I think we're good to go. If there aren't any questions, glad to get some of those items out of the way. We are going to start with Norma Volkemer, and she's going to introduce our budgets for Kansas State School for the Blind and Kansas State School for the Deaf. We do have some individuals that will be providing testimony, and once that is completed, we can take time for questions. So Norma, welcome, and she will be doing the School of the Blind first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me okay on WebEx? Yes, it seems like it. Would you like me to, after School for the Blind, let the School for the Blind superintendent testify and then go to the School for the Deaf, or do you want me to do both budget presentations?
I think that would be really helpful to us for people to digest it one budget at a time. Thank you.
And first, before I get to the budgets, I'll actually point you to the top paper that you had. It's not going to be orange, but it should say Budget Committee and Subcommittee Report Out Procedure. This is just to note that in order to reduce person-to-person contact, we're moving away from the signature page on subcommittee reports that we traditionally have. So the usual format would be after recommendations, I would create a subcommittee report, and then I would seek out signatures from everyone on the committee, just noting that they are agreeing that the budget was moved out. Not that you necessarily agree with whatever budget is eventually recommended, just that it was moved out by the committee. Instead of that, you will receive an email from me, and you'll just need to respond to that email with essentially your virtual signature, as it were. So that paper details that, and you should have gotten that in a PDF form as well via email this morning. We'll move now to the School for the Blind. So you should have a budget analysis document entitled Kansas State School for the Blind. This is the draft copy, but I'll be presenting from that today. So starting with, I'll note that the School for the Blind is located in Kansas City. Its main mission is to serve as a leader in the development of programs and practices serving students up to the age of 21 with vision services. The school serves as the center for the state-of-the-art education of Kansas children who are either blind or visually impaired, and the training and support base for teachers across the state who work with children who have sensory impairments. The page 2 through page 4 are an overview of major issues from prior years, as well as the very high-level key points of the budget summaries for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. So I'll move past that and take you to page 5, which is the performance measures. I'll just note there, these are the top 3 performance measures as determined by the agency and the governor that they use for tracking this budget. So it's number of students served statewide, number of students receiving services on campus, and then percent of students achieving IEP goals and objectives. The next few pages are some graphs. So the first one is a 10-year budget trend. And the second on page 7 is kind of a summary of all operating expenditures for fiscal year 2020, 2021, and 2022. And I'll have you turn to page 8. At the top, it should say budget overview, and then it should say fiscal year 2021, current year. I'll note that there were 2 adjustments to the budget approved by the 2020 legislature. The first was an increase of $9. This was $9 that would have been related to COVID expenditures and reimbursed in fiscal year 2020 by the State Finance Council from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The $9 then in SGF would have been reappropriated into fiscal year 2021 and is being added to the budget for that. So that's the reappropriation of SGF for that. And then there is a decrease of about $40,000, and that is as a result of the allotments, which I'll get into further detail when discussing the current year's budget. Below the change from approved budget table, I'll note that the agency is requesting a revised estimate of $7.8 million, including 5.7 million SGF for fiscal year 2021. This includes an operating budget of $6.9 million, including 5.7 million SGF, so it's the same SGF. The revised operating budget is an all funds increase of about $63,000 or 0.9% above the approved amount. And this includes a special revenue fund increase of about $63,000 or 6.0%. And that's primarily attributable to filling of positions in fiscal year 2021. The revised estimate does include capital improvement expenditures of about $940,000, and I'll get into details for the capital improvement at the end of the budget presentation. Turning to page 9, I'll note that the governor recommends total expenditures of $8.3 million, including 5.7 million SGF in fiscal year 2021. This includes an operating budget of $7.2 million, including 5.7 million SGF in fiscal year 2021. This is a federal funds increase of about $350,000. So this is all money that the Office of Recovery awarded to the School for the Blind from federal COVID-19 related funding, all for operational expenditures. They also awarded some capital improvement funding, which you'll see that the governor recommends a slight increase in the capital improvements, and that's what that is attributable to. The governor's allotments, I'll note on page 9, the governor allotted $40,000. That's in the CAPERS death and disability and then coronavirus relief swap. And I'll pause there for any questions on fiscal year 2021.
Representative Penn has a question.
Is it okay if the presenters remove their mask while they're speaking? I'm having a little trouble hearing. If they're comfortable, of course.
Are you comfortable?
I can try speaking up a little bit more. I can be loud, don't worry.
Okay.
So then we'll move to page 10, which has the fiscal year 2022 budget year. Underneath the table, I'll note that the agency requests an operating budget of $6.9 million. This includes $5.8 million SGF for fiscal year 2022, and this is an all funds increase of about $55,000 or 0.8%, and an SGF increase of about $92,000 or 1.6% above the fiscal year 2021 revised estimate. The increase is primarily attributable to increases in salaries and wages due to the filling of positions in fiscal year 2021. And there was a shifting of expenditures to SGF from special revenue funds, which is why you have that larger SGF increase. The agency also requests capital improvement expenditures of about $919,000. Again, I'll get into that in further detail later. The governor concurs with the agency's request for fiscal year 2022. Below that, I'll note that the fiscal year 2022 reduced resources. The detailed information is on page 11. The agency submitted a reduced resources budget of about $584,000, all SGF, and 7.0 FTE positions, and the governor did not recommend reducing the agency's budget. And I will pause there for questions on fiscal year 2022.
Questions? Okay, and if you would just re-explain for us, if it's in 2020, if there's 81.5 FTEs, and then it says that there's an increase in salaries and wages, but attributable to increase in FTE, it's still 81.5. And I thought full-time equivalent would be full-time, but I thought maybe we talked about it yesterday and you said part-time to full-time. So would those be, so how does that factor if the 81.5 is consistent from last year?
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the committee, so the FTE is just those full-time equivalents. So it could have been that they filled some part-time positions. It could have been some shifting. It could have been that they were seeking funding for, that they had allocated funding for 81.5 FTE, even if they didn't have all of the salaries and wages for that. So that could have been that they had asked for 81.5 FTE in previous years, but hadn't actually allocated the salaries and wages for that, if that makes sense. But I think it was in part just a lot of part-time that they shifted, where they just added a few hours. It didn't add to the FTE, it just increased the salaries and wages. But John Harding, who is the superintendent for the School for the Blind, is also on WebEx. He may be able to better speak to that. Otherwise, I can follow up with you as well.
Sure, he can reference if he'd like.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sure, you can respond now if you'd like.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is John Harding. I'm superintendent at Kansas State School for the Blind. I think our fiscal analyst did a pretty good job of answering that. If you have more questions, we're happy to give you more detailed information at a later time, but I think she answered the question effectively.
Proceed.
So starting on page 14, you'll notice the program detail. So there are 3 programs in the School for the Blind: administrative services, instructional services, and support services. You'll also see the FTE and the funding broken down. And Madam Chair, if you'd like, I can go into the 3 programs by funding, or I can move to capital improvements.
You can move on to capital.
All right, so turning to page 20, so it's the last page. For capital improvements, the agency is estimating a revised capital improvements budget of about $940,000, all state institutions building fund in fiscal year 2021. This is a decrease of about $6,000 or 0.6% below the amount approved. And that's just funding reappropriated that they're asking just be deleted or lapsed. And at the bottom of page 20, you'll see that the governor recommends a capital improvements budget of 1.0 million, all special revenue funds. This increase of about 108,000 or 11.5% is again that federal coronavirus relief fund money that was allocated to the School for the Blind, and for this to be used for HVAC plasma ionization devices to limit the spread of COVID-19. Turning to page 21, you'll see for fiscal year 2022, the agency is requesting a capital improvements budget of about 919,000, all SIBF, for fiscal year 2022. This is a decrease of about 21,000 below the, or 2.3% below the fiscal year 2021 revised estimate. This decrease is primarily attributable to the completion of upgrades in the safety and security systems portion and kind of a shifting to maintenance only. And that decrease is also partially offset by the increase for HVAC replacement in the campus boilers and HVAC, and the adding of the replacement of the back gate and adding of perimeter fencing under the rehabilitation and repair. And then, of course, there was the decrease from the CRF in fiscal year 2021. And the governor concurs with the agency's capital improvements budget for fiscal year 2022. And I will stand now for any questions on School for the Blind.
All right, committee, are there any questions? All right, I will thank you, Norma, and we will now go to Superintendent John Harding. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. I appreciate the opportunity to submit brief testimony today. I am John Harding, Superintendent School for the Blind, and would like to express our sincere appreciation for the state's commitment to our school and the students who are blind and low vision. We simply request that the committee concur with the governor's recommendation for FY 2022 budget request. Our school offers parents of children who are blind a voice in deciding where, what, how, and from whom their children receive special ed services. While COVID has forced many schools into remote learning, KSSB has offered continuous on-site learning to serve students who are blind since last August. Our field service team has also delivered on-site services to students in their home and school communities since August. In December alone, this past year, we provided direct instruction to 105 students, technical assistance to 44 teachers, and visited 62 school districts in 36 counties. We're also innovating in, I think, pretty dramatic ways. In the last 2 years, we've installed a state-of-the-art wayfinding system here on campus. We have developed a computer science course in conjunction with Microsoft Teams. We have an accessible makerspace and mobile STEM van that travels the state. We have developed a new preschool enrichment program. We've expanded our services via low vision clinics, teacher training programs, a statewide library, our deafblind project, and we've funded a new playground with both public and private funds. We could not do all these things without the support and the generosity of our state. I would again ask that you support the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2022 for the Kansas State School for the Blind. I appreciate your consideration, allowing me to present the testimony, and I certainly would stand for questions if there are questions.
Committee, are there questions for Superintendent Harding? No questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for your service, for the work that you do for the School for the Blind. We appreciate that, and we look forward to working this on Thursday. All right, Norma, you're back up. Committee, we're going to go to our next budget.
All right. Yes, so in front of you should have the Kansas State School for the Deaf. And just real quick before I get into this, there is pursuant to KSA 76-11A16 and A17, Those both tie the salaries for teachers and licensed personnel for the School for the Blind and the School for the Deaf to the Olathe School District. Prior to fiscal year, well, up to fiscal year 2021, those were included as enhancement requests in the budget. Starting in fiscal year 2022, those are included in the base budget. So that is also partially attributable to that salaries and wage increase for the School for the Blind. It is tied to that. So moving to the School for the Deaf. School for the Deaf is located in Olathe, and its mission is to ensure that deaf and hard of hearing students achieve their full potential in a language-rich environment. The School for the Deaf offers a comprehensive curriculum for deaf and hard of hearing students ages 21 and under, and both American Sign Language and English are integral parts of the total school program. And I will note that the agency is responsible for the implementation of the statewide language assessment program, or LAP. And Luann Barron from the School for the Deaf superintendent is online as well and will be providing testimony. Again, pages 2 through 4 are major issues over the last 10 years and key points from the budget summary. Moving to page 5, again, you have the performance measures. So this again includes number of students enrolled in campus-based programs, and then the number of school districts, cooperatives, service centers, and other programs receiving technical assistance from the School for the Deaf. Page 6 is where you see that 10-year overview of operating expenditures. Page 7 is your summary of operating expenditures. And moving to page 8, you should see the budget overview, and it should say fiscal year 2021, current year. Again, there were 2 adjustments to the approved budget. The first was $401, now from that federal coronavirus relief funding that was swapped for the 2020, and a decrease of about $79,000 from the governor's allotments. Under the change from approved table, you'll see that the agency requests a revised estimate of $11.8 million, including $9.4 million SGF in fiscal year 2021. This includes an operating budget of $10.4 million, including $9.4 million SGF in fiscal year 2021. This is an all funds decrease of about $207,000 or 2.0%, and an SGF decrease of $401. Below the amount approved by the 2020 legislature. That decrease is primarily attributable to decreased contractual services expenditures for travel reimbursement and decreased computer software maintenance costs. It's partially offset by increased salaries and wages due to the filling of a full-time housekeeping position, and of course, then the maintaining of the teacher and licensed personnel salaries. Turning to page 9, you'll note that the agency submitted a revised estimate of for capital improvements of $1.4 million, all SIBF. And again, I'll go into detail at the end on the capital improvements. The governor is recommending total expenditures of $12.2 million, including $9.4 million SGF, and an operating expenditures budget of $10.7 million, including $9.4 SGF in fiscal year 2021. This is an all funds increase of $320,000 or 3.1% above the revised estimate from the agency. And much like the School for the Blind, that's attributable to the receiving of COVID-related operational expenditure money from the Office of Recovery. And again, like School for the Blind, the governor's recommendation includes an increase in capital improvements for those HVAC plasma ionization devices. At the bottom of page 9, you'll see the governor's allotments in this agency totaled about $79,000. Again, that was for CAPERS, death and disability, and then the coronavirus relief swap. And I will pause there for any questions on fiscal year 2021. Moving on to page 10, for fiscal year 2022, the agency is requesting $12.2 million, including $10.1 million SGF for fiscal year 2022, and an operating budget of $11 million, including $10.1 million SGF. This is an all funds increase of about $624,000 or 6.0%, and an SGF increase of about $626,000 or 6.6% above the fiscal year, that should say, so the fiscal year 2021 revised estimate. This increase is primarily attributable to, again, the increased expenditures for salaries and wages for staff. And again, more specifically tied here as well to the enhancement request for the language assessment program, phase 3, so that's expanding that program. And again, the filling of the full-time housekeeping position in fiscal year 2021. The governor is recommending total expenditures of $11.6 million, including $9.6 million SGF for fiscal year 2022, and an operating expenditures budget of $10.5 million, including $9.6 million SGF. This is an SGF decrease of about $467,000, or 4.2% below the agency's request, and that is attributable to the governor not recommending the funding of the language assessment program phase 3 enhancement request. So turning to page 11, you'll see that enhancement detail. So the agency is requesting that funding, as well as 4.0 FTE positions for fiscal year 2022. It would fund the third year of the LAP, which is being phased in over multiple years. Its implementation began in fiscal year 2019, and the School for the Deaf did not ask for initial costs, and that was to begin assessing about 110 children, and those initial costs were about $211,000. The total enhancement request would include $264,000 for salaries and wages, $128,000 for in-state travel, and the remainder for other contractual services and commodities expenditures. And the governor did not recommend this request, and I will pause there for any questions. Oh, sorry, forgot about fiscal year 2022 reduced resources. So turning to page 12. The agency submitted a reduced resources budget of about $960,000. That's the 10%. You'll see it in most budgets. And again, the governor did not recommend reducing the agency's budget for fiscal year 2022. And now I will pause for questions on fiscal year 2022.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, going back to page 8, help me out on the 216,000 that it appears they did not need due to contractual services and travel reimbursements decrease. And then the governor approved another 224,000. So, but that 224,000 I think was mostly COVID related money. The 215,000 is what I'm kind of looking for. What was that? It was an all funds, so where's that money? Is that in a fund, or are they wanting, is there a way that we can move that to the next year?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, so that is all for contractual services. So yes, my understanding is it's essentially funding that they didn't need for travel and then computer software. It's in all other funds. I don't know exactly if it's in federal funding or some of their special revenue funding. I'd have to check exactly where that funding's out. But that 216,000 is primarily that. Okay. The governor's addition of the 224,000 is because she added about 320,000 for the CRF.
Right, so it's mostly, so I would be interested in that 215 or 216,000. And if we're able to move that over to 2022. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think he's referring to the language assessment plan program. So, okay. Any other questions for Norma? Go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I may, I mean, funding from fiscal year 2021 could be always reappropriated into fiscal year 2022. Of course, an agency would have to be directed on how to spend that. But my understanding is it's essentially money that they don't need for fiscal year 2021.
Right. It's okay, but as long as it's not something that we can't use for another purpose, I guess is, if it's federal money and we need to make sure we can't use it. It was used for travel before, so I suppose we could probably use it for travel for the other also. So.
Sure, so I can follow up on where exactly that funding is and what limitations it might have.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, would you like me to go into program detail?
Yes, yes, briefly.
So again, starting on page 15, you'll note program detail. School for the Deaf has the same 3 programs as School for the Blind. And I should note that School for the Deaf and School for the Blind share some operational expenditures. So there's some overlap in food services and their budget and everything like that. So there is some sharing between the 2 agencies. Starting on page 16, you'll see administrative services. For this program, I'll just note the governor's recommendation increase in fiscal year 2021. That's because that's where all of that CRF money is going to be. It's all going to be in the administrative services program. So that's why there is such a jump in that program. Other than that, the governor concurs for fiscal year 2022 with the agency's request. Instructional services begins on page 18. This is where you see a lot of their decreased expenditures, and that's because some of it is for salaries and wages as well as contractual services. So the overall is mostly contractual services, but in instructional services, they saw a decrease in salaries and wages for temporary positions. So things like coaches, paraprofessionals, those kind of positions that work one-on-one with students. And that does fluctuate on a year-to-year basis, so it's not entirely attributable to, say, COVID-19, but you did see a decrease. And there was also a miscoding of one of the FTE positions from instructional services to administrative services. So there's some slight shifting of salaries and wages between the 2 programs. And again, for fiscal year 2022, in the instructional services, you'll note that the governor didn't recommend the LAP enhancement request. Support services starts on page 20. The governor concurred with the agency's request for both fiscal years. And the main changes here are going to be increased salaries and wages for group health and retirement benefits. And those are increases you'll see across a number of agencies. Those are just increases set by the Division of Budget, typical increases for those benefits. Capital improvements is again on the final 2 pages. I will note that for fiscal year 2021, there was a very large reappropriation of about $169,000 from fiscal year 2020 into fiscal year 2021, all SIBF. That was due to savings. So from the Roth building, they did some HVAC replacement. They saved money on that, and they intended to use that money to bid for a theater communication system project. Basically, to help with, it's an ADA compliant, and it's a very kind of fancy theater communication system for deaf and hard of hearing students. They could use it. They were going to bid that out in fiscal year 2020. They were unable to because of COVID-19, and so they reappropriated that funding into fiscal year 2021, and they intend on completing the project in fiscal year 2021. But that is why you have that large reappropriation. And then for fiscal year 2022, again, you're going to see an increase in the governor's recommendation above the agency's request, and that's going to be due to that CRF. However, the governor did not recommend part of their rehabilitation and repair costs, and that is $171,000 to replace the elementary playground surface and equipment. And I can pause there for any questions, or I can go into a little bit more detail on capital improvements.
We'll ask the committee, are there any questions? Any expansions on capital improvement? Okay, I think we're good. All right, thank you. With that, Luann Barron is the superintendent at School of the Deaf. Welcome, Luann.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and committee. I am Luann Barron. I'm the superintendent at the Kansas School for the Deaf, and I'm checking in with my interpreter to make sure everything's working well. Can you hear the interpreter, Lori's voice, before I move on? Yes? Okay. I wanted to give you my appreciation for the support of the School for the Blind, the ongoing support for deaf and hard of hearing students throughout the state of Kansas, both on campus and the statewide program. I know that many are wanting to know how deaf and hard of hearing students are doing within your region. Typically or traditionally, much of our focus has been on the campus-based program, and a lot of those appropriations went for the program here. And now we have more and more appropriations going out to students throughout the state through our outreach efforts. And those numbers continue to grow. And in fact, even with the COVID-19 pandemic and coronavirus, we have had an increase in the number of states more than ever. Our campus-based program, we have about 95% of our students that are here for on-site learning, and they're working to get the 5% that are still on remote back on campus, because that most definitely is the best learning environment for deaf and hard of hearing children. I'm requesting that the committee concur with the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2022. I'm also here to make an additional request for the enhancement for the LAP program, or the Language Assessment Program, for $466,658. I did stand before the committee last year with the same request, and due to COVID, everything was put on hold. And so I'm here again this year making the same request for your consideration so that we're able to continue with our current language assessment program. And to refresh your memories, in 2016, the House and the Senate unanimously passed legislation for this program, meaning that children ages birth to 8 would receive an annual language assessment, specifically to the language that they use, American Sign Language and English, to ensure that they're meeting the various milestones that need to be in place. And also for them to be able to develop age-appropriate language skills, which would be commensurate to their peers. And so we are continuing with that, with those assessments, and the Kansas School for the Deaf is in the 3rd year of the implementation of that program throughout the state. We have had a reduction in the number of students assessed this year because of COVID, but we are continuing our efforts because we feel that it's critical to take advantage of every opportunity to assess language, to ensure that they don't continue to be delayed in their language and their acquisition of language. At this time, through the Sound Start program, which is early intervention services for deaf and hard of hearing children, we are estimating that there are approximately 650 children throughout the state of Kansas that are ages birth to 8 that are deaf or hard of hearing. And so without the additional funding to support the ability to continue those language assessments, we wouldn't be able to follow up and ensure that they're not lagging further behind in their language growth. And so this is a critical program to consider funding so that we can continue to assess students throughout the state. As with any language, learning starts at birth, and it needs to be monitored and tracked. The interventions need to be in place, especially with deaf and hard of hearing children, to ensure that they're continuing to acquire that language so that they can be academically successful. A strong language foundation, of course, is a great predictor of academic success. They both go hand in hand with each other. In our birth to 3 program, and then ages 3 to 5, and then 5 to 8, you should see an increase in language learning with appropriate interventions. But without those assessments and those annual interventions or annual assessments and interventions, you see a language delay or language deprivation, which just prolongs the issue. And as a result of that, with this being our 2nd year of doing the assessments, the reports show that 70% of the children that were assessed in 2019 did not meet their language milestones, their age-appropriate language milestones. And this last month, we were able to complete the report for 2020, and sadly, we assessed 64 children. That's not the sad part. The sad part is that 79% of those 64 children did not meet their language milestones. So that means that they're not acquiring language appropriately and they're continuing to fall further behind. And so recall that we are assessing children who are older that are already behind in their language, so between the ages of 5 to 8. So we did expect a drop in that number of children not meeting their language milestones. And the reason that I'm here is to ask once again that funding be allocated to us to be able to maintain the monitoring of those children. So the next phase is to phase in 250 more children. We want to be able to ensure that we're not lagging further behind, or they're not lagging further behind in their language development, so that they can be successful both academically and lead meaningful lives. Without these interventions and these assessments, they're not kindergarten ready. They exhibit more social and emotional issues. And so again, that strong language foundation is critical for them to be able to function as a whole healthy person, both mentally, emotionally, and academically. And so the best response to that is early intervention through the language assessment program, where we can assess all children early. So the request for fiscal year 2022 is $466,658 to be able to allow KSD to assess more children throughout the state, to be able to track them. And we would be increasing that number to 250 ages birth to 8. With the law being passed in 2016, we were able to manage the startup of the assessment program with funding in-house. But we do know that we can do more with support from the legislature and from these funds. That would definitely help us to be able to lead those children to positive language acquisition and fluency in their language and communication. They would experience language without limits, and it is a legal obligation for the state of Kansas to be able to do that from a budgetary standpoint. And so we are asking for that enhancement to be able to further the program. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Luann. We have some questions. Representative Hoffman, and then Representative Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you, Leanne, for being here. So going back to what I had mentioned with our analyst, the 216,000 that was not used, that you, and I guess it was probably because of, it says decreased contractual services and travel expenditures. Is there a reason why that could not be used to go forward to help fund part of this?
That is a question that gave me a reason to consider. I would need to check with our business office manager to find out more about that. I know that we included travel expenses in the language assessment program request, so I would need to check with her to see and get back with you on that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
And Norma, real quick, what page is the detail on the language assessment plan where it shows what they've paid each year?
Madam Chair, the detail, are you looking for in the budget analysis?
Yes. I feel like it's in there and I just can't seem to find it where it talks about how much they've paid each year.
I don't know that, I don't think it was included for each year. The language assessment program is included in the enhancement detail on page 11. It notes the initial costs, which I believe are what they've expended each year for that program, since it has only had the 2 years that it has had the program since they did phase 1 and phase 2.
Sorry. It does say on page 11 that there is $128,000 for in-state travel for staff members. So there is some that would seem to correspond very nicely with what was already appropriated for travel and was not used in 2021, sorry. My next question, again, as I'm looking at this, and I'm probably just not going to be able to find it quick enough, but Norma, do we have the costs, the reoccurring costs for the years after 2022 for this program, LAP?
I'm sure, just to clarify, so you're looking for the cost for phase 4 and phase 5? I believe I may have them. Give me a couple minutes to check real quick.
Sure. One thing we might do when you're looking for that, but you might even be able to bring that back to us on a white paper separate as well. So we can actually kind of see what they've invested without having to ask for more dollars, what they're going to need to maintain the program, that kind of thing. Did you find it or you want to wait?
I do have
Okay.
what would be, so
Madam
additional.
Chairperson, I do have some information I can share if that's okay with you.
Okay, you can go first and Norma can follow.
Okay. For phase 4, fiscal year 2023, our intent is to request $192,207. And then for fiscal year 2024, $199,232 to be able to continue to expand the program to 772 children throughout the state. With, so that would be $858,097 to fully implement the program statewide and to be able to provide those assessments on an annual basis for all children ages birth to 8.
Norma, I remember having some numbers in the past like that, including the number of students that we are able to reach. So if you could provide a chart for us, and you can email it perhaps before we work it on Thursday. And I would like to have each of the phases, how much has been provided by the legislature in addition. I know that they used existing funds for the original phases, and then how many students that it will, you know, so we have a better picture of the entirety of the program and where we are now.
Certainly.
Thank you. That'll help. Representative Estes.
Superintendent, pardon my question, I'm very new to the committee, but can you help me understand why phase 3 would not have been included in the governor's budget? Why were you guys just cut off? I don't understand what's going on.
I know from last year, we seem to be it seemed to be going that direction that we would be supported last year. And so I don't know for this year why, but I know that the legislature would be included in that decision. And I have been consistently making the request for the funds. So this is the second year. Last year, it seemed as though we were very close to it going to omnibus, but then with COVID and everything happening, that was all suspended, and so we're hopeful this year for approval.
Let me ask a follow-up question, Madam Chairman. Could this be about where the money is coming from and what funds? I'm really trying to understand why it just completely disappeared from your budget, from her.
I would not know that information myself. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to elaborate on that question. So there's not been a specific reason given that this was not included?
None that I'm aware of.
So what frustrates me, this is our second year to see this request. And, you know, what you provided us is in 2016, the legislature, both the House and the Senate unanimously passed it. Governor Kelly was a senator. And from what I'm understanding is she's not interested in funding a legislative mandate, which I just want to say on the record, that's sad. That's for a program for kids to be assessed so that they can grow up and learn to use their skills and develop their skills so they can be part of ongoing education and the working population. And this is the second year the governor has refused to fund this. And I want to tell you I'm disappointed, and we're going to look for existing dollars, whether they're federal or whether they're the Department of Education, or whether they're existing funds you had from the previous year. We're trying our best to find ways to fund what the governor would not fund. All right, committee, any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Luann. And so we are going to, yes, Norma, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, if I may, I do have a follow-up for Representative Hoffman's question. It appears that the majority of the funding decrease in fiscal year 2021 is in the general fee fund and the student activity fee fund. So those are the fee funds that this agency has. So whether or not that funding would be able to be moved, I could continue to look into.
Can you clarify, because your explanation was it was for travel expenses not used and software not used, so those were paid out of the fee funds?
So it seems like the overall, so some of the funding gets shifted around SGF, and then they use some special revenue funds to kind of move everything around. It looks like the overall funding decreases are in those two fee funds for fiscal year 2021.
Okay, so I think pretty much Representative Hoffman hit a really interesting point here, and I definitely, if you would, Norma, work with Luann and figure out where those funds are, if they're still available, if we can access those funds from 2021 and appropriate them in 2021 as existing, yeah, for 2022, but count it, you know, maybe it's adjusted in 2021 and carried over, if that can be done. So I'd like to look at these existing funds rather than adding, so, and certainly SGF. Okay, we're going to try to find some solutions for you. All right, any other comments? Again, thank you. We will be taking a look at this budget item on Thursday. So with that, committee, if we have no other questions regarding these two budgets, we're going to close this little informational hearing on these budgets, and we're actually going to work a bill, and then Norma, we're going to come back to you. So committee, at this time, I'd like to open up. What is your will regarding HB 2067? And Roger, if you could pass that out to committee members. If you don't have 2067 with you, then Roger has a copy. If you do have it, you can just tell him no, thank you. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that we pass House Bill 2067 out favorable.
Do we have a second? We have a second from Representative Tarwater. And now we'll open up for discussion, committee. Representative Wynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where did you say, thank you, sir, the, can I just former Speaker O'Neill? Well, anyway, where is the assessment form? You said that it was sent to us?
Yes, the needs assessment was provided by courtesy. I think Norma or Roger sent it to the committee. Is that correct? Can either one of you confirm that the needs assessment was sent to the committee, Roger or Norma? I feel like one of you did. Norma's looking at me like, I don't think so.
You specified what you're referring.
So the need assessments is actually in the bill. Remember, we talked about it, 2067. It talks about the need assessment on line number 9 of HB 2067. It was something that Conferee Mike back there, Mike O'Neill, he said, he shared it with us, but he didn't have a copy in his testimony. He said it was on KSDE's website, and he also said that the school boards generally didn't know what it was. They weren't, that document or that wasn't ever shared or communicated with them. So Roger, did we get that to them? If not, then certainly committee, you guys can go to KSDE website.
Would it be too much to ask that he provided to the staff person now? So that
If they
when we
have it.
So that when we discuss it with our caucus.
Well, sure, definitely. I know I have a copy of it. Let me see.
We did not get it. That's kind of obvious.
Well, I know, I'm digital. Okay. And then we're going to forward it to you as soon as we can find it. Okay, hold on. 2067. Y'all got it? Okay, do you want to reply? Yeah. Just go ahead and forward it to everyone. Sometimes those get lost in translation or get doubled up and sometimes hard to search for. Well, can you just forward? You can. And then Roger can forward it back to all the committee members. That would be great. Okay, other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I close.
All right, all those in favor, and we're going to hold on a second. Do we have Representative Huber? There he is. Okay, I can see the background of his office. Perfect. So he is qualified then to vote because he is in the building. I don't think we have Representative Landwehr with us. Okay, all those in favor say aye, or if you're not here, you can raise your hand. Aye. And those opposed? Okay, two opposed, is that correct? 3 opposed? 3 opposed, motion carries. All right, committee, we have passed out 2067 favorably for passage with no amendments. We are back to Norma. She's going to provide us some data. Is that data we already have, or are you going to pass that out?
The committee should have received copies last week.
Oh.
It should be the lilac, purple, and then a very colorful graphic sheet. I do have a few extra physical copies as well. I'm sure I do have some extra
Yes.
copies if anyone would like.
And then when we get to each one, just be sure you give us a moment to shuffle through and find the right document.
Certainly, and I'll endeavor to make sure I say the correct heading.
And I will note, committee, that on Thursday, the plan is to go over in detail the COVID funding. I would ask a favor of each of you for your county. For example, Representative Estes or Johnson County or Wyandotte or whatever county you live in. if you wouldn't mind, contact the county and find out what the Spark funding was for all of the school districts in your county. And you can share that information with us, because you're going to get an updated large one of these spreadsheets. It's been updated, right, but you're going to get an updated, it's going to be green. And in it, it has blank lines for the county funding, and that's apparently right now hard to get. So Norma's going to try to get it, but if she can't get it, at least we would have your counties. And so per school district. That makes any sense at all? If it doesn't, holler at me later and I'll explain. All right, Norman.
So, Madam Chair, if you'd like, I can touch on that real quick. You should all have blue spreadsheets from last week. There will be an updated green version. The county funding for the August and September reconciliations, this is the coronavirus relief funding that the Spark Committee sent to counties. It's about $400 million. The original reconciliations in August and September provided subrecipients. So it listed every organization, including school districts and other K-12 education institutions, that were either seeking funding or had received funding. However, starting in October, the Office of Recovery started doing those reconciliations only in the broadest sense of the county gave X amount of money to K-12, and so it's just not broken down by school district. So the green version and your blue version have the most recent county numbers, and since those are not by subrecipient, that's why you have that. The final three lines are items purchased, which are all pulled from those August and September reconciliations, and then proposed plans or countywide expenditures that were education related. Again, all of that information is pulled from those original August and September reconciliation documents, which I believe the Office of Recovery does still have online. So each county was required to submit a 6 to 8 page form that had that level of detail. The Office of Recovery now has that dashboard that just doesn't provide the same detail.
Representative Hoy.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. So do we, if our county is already indicated on there, are we still looking for further detail, or is there still follow-up? For example, Johnson County, it says for PPE, we need more information.
So I believe the Madam Chair was referring to if you wanted to reach out to the county, they may be able to tell you what each school district received versus the spreadsheet currently just has the county gave $400,000 to school districts. I will note both Johnson and Sedgwick County did not provide funding to school districts or other subrecipients. All of that funding went to PPE and other county-wide purchases, just for those two counties though. Some counties also, there just may be no detail provided on the Office of Recovery. So I simply couldn't tell you if they provided
Norma,
funding.
when you talk about PPE, so that means, for example, Sedgwick and Johnson County did not receive any PPE for their school districts through that money?
So they may have, it's just that they didn't provide the school district the money to buy the PPE. Johnson and Sedgwick County chose to expend it exclusively as a county. They didn't grant it to a school district or other organization.
So what you could do, which would be very good to understand, in my county, so just give you an idea, in my county, Butler County right here, it has all of these school districts, but over here underneath the item purchase, we don't know the amount that each school district got, but I did contact my county, and so I do have that. So I know it's 100,000 or 250,000, or for example, Andover, I think it was 1 million something, and that's significant. Now that means that those individual school districts would have had to buy their own PPE. They would have expended some of those monies for that purpose, for obviously COVID-related purchases. So if, in fact, a county purchased all the PPE or all the things that relate to that and distributed it, which I'm not sure if that's what you mean, then that's still a value to the school district and would be good to know, because then they didn't have to expend any of their monies on that. Is that what?
Yes, so the Office of Recovery information, so that the coronavirus relief fund money, all of that data is pulled from the Office of Recovery at some point in the last 6 months. It just means that when they submitted those county reconciliation reports, Johnson and Sedgwick County just said, we're expending it on X, Y, and Z, which is detailed on the spreadsheet, and did not list any subrecipients. Other counties listed subrecipients, so it could have said School district is getting $19,400, and they're requesting an additional $26,000 because those early reconciliations were July, August, September. And they may or may not have included details on what the school district was requesting that funding for. If it was detailed, it's detailed on the spreadsheet. For example, one school district was looking to purchase a school bus. Anything like that, that kind of detailed information, if it's on the spreadsheet, it was pulled from the August or September reconciliation reports, because those were, again, 68-page documents.
And we'll definitely talk extensively about it on Thursday, and the COVID money is really, it's very important for us to understand it. We do know that the school districts education received between $550 and $580 million. And the reason that's relevant to our discussion is because, as I noted, Andover is one of my school districts, or in part, $1.9 million. And so that's a significant amount of money. Augusta, that's where my kids go to school, $255,000, and that's not included on their total. So that's why it's particularly relevant. Yes, Representative Estes.
I would love it if you had Roger email or you email me your questions specifically. I think this, and other freshmen may feel the same way. Like, yeah, you're asking for some specific things, and I'm happy to help, but I'm not sure that I understand it well to articulate your question well, so that would be helpful.
I can do that. I'll work with Roger to get a question out for those that would like to find out any additional funding for your county. Okay, great. All yours, Norma.
All right, so in front of you, you should have, like I said, 3 purple sheets, and at the top, there should be a white document with some very colorful graphs entitled K-12 Enrollment and Funding. I will be trying to move kind of through everything at a rapid pace, but feel free to stop me for questions. All right, so the first one is the headcount and enrollment. So you should have the school year, the unaudited headcount, the FTE enrollment, and the weighted FTE. That weighted FTE does exclude the special education weighting. I do touch on that later. So just so you kind of understand what each of those are, so the unaudited headcount is literally just the number of heads counted on count day, which is September 20th. The FTE is going to be that more statutorily defined what a student is. And then the weighted FTE is, of course, with the weightings added, and that's what the funding is based on. Then the bottom half is for virtual schools. Again, school year, then the head count, the FTE. I will note that virtual schooling has both FTE, part-time students, and students who are over the age of 19. The FTE is just that, is the full-time students for the virtual school pulled from the legal max. And then you have the virtual state aid. There is, you can see, an increase in the virtual school headcount for the preliminary numbers for 2020 and 2021. Moving to the second page, you'll see the at-risk funding. So school year, the free lunch headcount, then the weighted FTE, and then the total at-risk funding. And then the special education, again, the headcount, the weighted FTE, and then the state aid. So that weighted FTE for the special education is not included in that original weighted FTE on the first page. And then the last page is just other weightings. So I pulled the bilingual weighted FTE, the career and technical education weighted FTE, and the transportation weighted FTE. And I will pause there for any questions on that document.
Any questions? Yes, Representative Alves.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for providing this. The free lunch head count, it's been a minute since I've looked at the weightings, but is there also a weighting for the reduced lunch head count?
So the weightings for the at-risk are at-risk and high-density at-risk. It is all the free lunch.
So refresh my memory, what is in the at-risk?
Sorry, Madam Chair, are you referring to essentially what is counted as at-risk under the at-risk FTE. And my understanding is just the free lunch headcount.
It is.
Okay, well then, according to that, then wouldn't those two columns be the same?
So this is the weightings for the free lunch headcount. So it's not going to be the exact number, it's the weighting. So it's going to be the 0.484.
Does that make sense?
So the at-risk weighted FTE is the headcount times 0.484.
Okay, yeah.
If there are no other questions on the K-12 enrollment and funding, I will move on to the first of the purple sheets.
Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I understood his question, do you have any numbers for reduced lunch?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I don't have the numbers for the reduced lunch. I do know it was about 9% of the population, and for the most recent school year, and the total at-risk and free and reduced was about 45%. So
Well, the question was,
I can't get the numbers.
do you have data just for reduced lunch? Not, maybe head count reduced lunch, weighted reduced lunch, but just reduced lunch?
I can get the head count for just the reduced lunch, yes.
That's what you asked. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, members, if I may follow up, do you want that for just the current school year, or would you like that going back 5 years as well?
The current school year would be sufficient.
All right, now we will move on to the first purple sheet. Should say Kansas School Finance Abbreviated. This is a very brief overview of school finance in Kansas. The first page touches on how state foundation aid is calculated. Its main two factors are the base aid for student excellence, or BASE, and the weighted full-time equivalent enrollment, FTE, for each school district. After a district's total foundation aid is determined, you determine the state foundation aid, and that's determined by subtracting the district's local foundation aid from its total foundation aid. And there is listed there what is included in the local foundation aid. The base in fiscal year 2020 was 4,436. It increased to 4,569 in fiscal year 2021. It'll increase to 4,706 in fiscal year 2022, 4,846 in fiscal year 2023, and beginning in school year 2023-2024, which is fiscal year 2024, it will be adjusted by the average percentage increase in the consumer price index for all urban consumers in the Midwest region during the 3 immediately preceding school years. Turning to page 2, you'll see the weightings. I've provided the list of the weightings as well as all of the statutes that correspond to those weightings. I will note that the high-density at-risk weighting was scheduled to expire at the end of fiscal year 2020 and was extended via proviso in the 2020 appropriations bill, which was SB 66. And there are also 2 formulas for the high-density at-risk weighting. And then there are 3 formulas for the low enrollment weighting. And in addition to, of course, the weightings, if a school district operates a virtual school, that district is eligible to receive virtual education state aid, and that is outside of the school finance formula, so that is funded separately. It is $5,000 for a full-time student, $1,700 for a part-time student, and about $800, I believe, for a student over the age of 19. And then I touch on the special education state aid. So current law provides reimbursement for excess costs. That includes Medicaid replacement state aid, catastrophic aid, transportation aid, and special education teacher aid. This reimbursement rate was set at 92%. The current year, I believe, is at about 73.2%. And then I'll just note that federal aid for special education is relatively static. And I am done with that one. I'll stand for any questions on the school finance abbreviated.
Keep trucking.
All right, so the third purple.
Wait one moment. Representative Hoyt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would appreciate 5 years of the reduced lunch.
It's probably
the
no
request.
problem for her to do that.
Thank you.
She can find 1 year, she can find,
I could probably pull it up in about 2 minutes.
yeah, we're good.
So the third document is your purple packet, is the school district funding for 2019-2020. Included in this, the first column is your school district number, then the county name, then the FTE enrollment, the weighted FTE, this time including the special education weighting, general state aid, then you have your LOB, your special education, your capital outlay, and your capital improvement. Those are, of course, your main categories for the consensus estimates. And then the second half of the spreadsheet touches on the state aid per pupil, federal aid and federal aid per pupil, local revenue and local revenue per pupil, and of course, total expenditures and total expenditures per pupil. And I can pause there for any questions on that.
Okay, as I'm just kind of scanning this real quick, Sedgwick, or the Wichita School District 259 has been the largest school district with 47. Is that still the case? What's KCK? What number are you? Would that be the second largest? Oh, goodness, yeah, that is a lot smaller. Okay, I was just curious, maybe just out of a curiosity, you could just provide us a quick little top 20 schools and enrollment. It sometimes helps us put things in context when we're having discussions. We could do it here, but we'd have to.
Ma'am, just to follow up, so do you want the top 20 for FTE enrollment?
Yeah. Okay, any items on this? You can go to the next.
All right, and your final purple sheet and final document of the day should be the state totals, all school districts. And this was just to kind of give you a better comparison of over time. Providing all of this funding over a number of years would lead to a lot of columns or a lot of rows. So this is includes the school year for 1998, 1999, 2010, 2011, and 2019, 2020 for that state aid, federal aid, local revenue, and total expenditures. I've also included some of the general state aid, supplemental general state aid, special education, and then I did include the CPIU as well, since that will be used for that base. And I'll pause there for any questions on that.
Okay, I know that the school districts provide, they prepare their budgets ahead of time. I think they finish them in August. We've got school board members that could correct me on that. So why do we not do the estimates for 2020-21 on here?
I couldn't speak to why the Department of Education doesn't have the estimates for 2020, 2021. This is all pulled from the Department of Education's website.
Oh, great. Could you ask them for that?
Certainly. I don't know whether or not they'd be able to provide that information, but I can certainly follow up.
All of those budgets have been turned in and complete. And I know we could fill in some of them ourselves, but as much information as we can that is current is so helpful. Okay, any other questions, committee?
Madam Chair, if I may just follow up. So do you want all of the columns that would be on this page?
Whatever they can provide us.
Certainly.
They could just update the chart and just send it digitally. We don't have to go over it. It's just something to have most current. Okay, any other questions, Norma? Is there anything that we forgot? Okay, it looks like on Thursday you will definitely want to bring back, any of the budget documents, you'll probably want to bring those back. You may get new budget documents, but you might want to have yours, and then you can chuck those that get replaced. Yes, Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the very last one, the state totals, all USD, I think, shouldn't that be the fifth column and then subsequent columns? Shouldn't that be state aid change from 1998 to 2020?
You're looking for the state aid change, the total funding? Yes, so that is So each of those is, so the first row obviously is a blank because it's not a change from its own year. And then from 2010, 2011, so it's the change from
From the
from 1998 to that year, and then,
Okay, from that, yeah, I got you now.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So then the
makes
number
more
by the 2019, 2021 is going to be the 20-year change.
Yes, okay, that makes, yeah. Thank you.
And I do want to just point out, if you look on this chart for the 2019-20% change from 1998, when I referenced that actually with Mr. Tallman, there's that 118% there. And in the same time period, the rate of inflation was 46%. So I just wanted to show you, so you have those numbers in front to look at personally. Okay. Committee, make sure you bring any bills that we have already, 2068, I believe. Make sure you have that with you tomorrow and Thursday. We will squeeze it in where we can, and just be prepared for long days, potentially for sure tomorrow and perhaps on Thursday. All right, we are adjourned.